It's a fitting day to have this conversation, being Nigeria's Independence Day, so we're super excited at the opportunity and to have esteemed industry players here for this session. Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's getting late, but we will not take too much of your time. Welcome to this session titled Securing the Future, Investing in Nigeria's Independent Oil and Gas Players Amidst Global Energy Shifts. Just a little background. Nigerian independents are increasingly at the heart of our upstream story. With IOCs divesting, our independents are stepping up, not just to take the opportunities, but to also take these responsibilities that the opportunities bring. Today I'll be speaking with a number of these players who would shed more light on the situation in the country and how the role that independents are playing in moving or progressing the industry forward. Without further ado, I'll start with the good doctor, Dr. Babajide, just to set the scene really on the role of independents and the evolution in Nigeria's upstream future. What unique role do independents play in ensuring Nigeria sustains and grows production?
Thank you very much, Moderator. And obviously, the most important role that the independent play is to actually drive up production for Nigeria. So, as you can imagine, over the past 10 to 15 years, independents have spent anywhere between $10 to $20 billion acquiring IOC's assets. And not just by acquiring these assets, they've made significant investment. I'll give an example, just to drive up the point. We have a water injection system, which the IOCs were unwilling to drive because, they get into this field, they reach peak production. Once you start having decline, they're ready to get out. But the independents were making the necessary investment to make sure that, they ramp up production. Second and very important role is that they engage local participation. So they're not just coming in and trying to drive value out of the country. They make sure that they engage properly with the community, they recruit from the community, they are vested in the community, their host communities. They've brought significant financing also to the industry. Yeah. So from finance standpoint, from driving innovation and technology transfer, from trying to shape the regulation itself. So they've played a significant role, in driving the sector. Thank you.
Let me go to George. Doctor spoke about the IOCs and what the industry was like when they were holding most of the assets. So with the divestments, recent divestments, how has this shaped the opportunities and the responsibilities for independents as they're coming into this role?
All right. So thank you for the question. The divestment has created three key things: the opportunity, responsibility, and accountability. Now it has provided opportunity for independents to come and play, in the sector, responsibility to ensure energy security and continuity, to ensure that the production and the future of the country energy is secured. And accountability, of course, you are accountable to both the local community, both to the investors, and of course to the sustainable growth of the asset that you've taken over. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Tosin, I'm going to come to you, and just to pick up of where something George spoke about, especially with regards to independence now taking over. What are the lessons learned so far? How's that process been as far as operating these assets that have been acquired is concerned?
I think the fundamental lesson learned is not all that glitters is gold. Essentially, prior to investing in these assets, you had your own, data that drove the decision-making process and all of that, right? But when you actually come into these assets, you find that there's more to it than meets the eye, essentially. It's been a rewarding experience. It's been interesting. If you look at the contributions that the independents have made over the last couple of years, I think around 30% of the proven reserves are done by the independents, about 20% of the gas outputs by the independents. And a lot of investing, if you look at the terminal that's been done recently. I think about $400 million worth of investment has been done by independents. So there are quite a number of challenges that we've come to. If you look at the area of security and a lot of the dilapidated infrastructure, there's a lot of work to be done there. In the area of regulation, post the PIA, NUPRC, which is the Nigerian regulator, have tried their best to ensure that they enable a good business working environment for the independents. So, but there's still gaps that needs to be closed, and we're working with them to try and ensure that all of those gaps are closed. And if you look at the area of technical know-how, there's a real challenge there, particularly in trying to take over from all of these IOCs and fill those shoes. By and large, the experience has been bittersweet. If you also consider the legacy issues, the legal battles, environmental commitments, if you also consider the ESG requirements as well. So we've had to step up the plate. The fortune that we have as a company, Sahara Group, is we hone our skills in trading. So and being able to access finance required that a lot of all these international edicts and treaties and whatnot needed to be complied with for us to be able to access finance. So we just leveraged our experience on the trading side and brought that to bear in the upstream. So there's quite a significant step to go, but we made the right direction. Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned the PIA, and I want to bring us back to the PIA in particular. I mean, we know how long it took for that law to be passed in the country. And just yesterday, the ministry was the winner of the Reformer Award for their role in sort of creating an enabling environment for companies such as the independents to thrive. So I want to come to you, Kingsley. This question is for you, really, and especially on the PIA. How effective has the PIA been in providing clarity and support for independence, and how does it impact the future of independence as they continue to grow in the space?
All right, thank you. I think that the PIA, which was, of course, passed in 2021, August, has actually created, a very clear framework, like a rule book for the oil and gas industry. And that clear framework has also enabled the independents to have clear line of sight to how the fiscals will appear or will affect profitability on that investment. Another point to also mention is the host community development trust. That have, of course, done more to enable our stakeholders, support not just the independents, but all the players in the industry. So, of course, there are gaps, and you would agree that because this is a nascent, act, there are so many regulations evolving out of that. And what we have noticed over time is that in the implementation, we just need to trudge along cautiously, because at the end of the day, even the regulators are also learning as the industry is learning to unfold the benefits of the PIA itself.
Yeah.
George, is this also your experience? So is there any particular gaps you want to share with us?
All right, so from where we see it in Heritage Energy, we recognize that the PIA, for once, have provided clarity for the independents to be regulated. Transparency has been created using that platform, right? But in the same token also, there are some regulatory responsibilities that need to be clarified. But from the independence point of view, it's important to recognize that the Act was not intended to be the final stopping point. It was intended to be an enabler, that will kind of champion or provide a guideline and a direction. Again, we understand that there will be need, to revise update, kind of tighten up the loopholes. But in doing that, it's also important that it becomes a partnership together, with the operators of the industry. Therefore, there is no strangulation, and therefore, all is also a win-win, both for the operator in the independent sector, right, and of course the government that is regulating it.
Fantastic. So I'm hearing that the law is clear, and then the regulator is willing and cooperative in making it work for independents. The panel is aligned in that. Okay. I think it was Kingsley that mentioned fiscal, so we're going to go right into it because, it's not the elephant in the room, but it's very important to, any acquisition from not just independents really, but in the oil and gas sector. And Tosin, I'm going to throw this one to you. And it relates to what are the financing models available for independents in today's climate with constrained capital in the oil and gas sector, and how have local banks assisted, independents in this venture?
I don't want to throw local banks under the bus, but it leads to the broader conversations that need to be had, right, in the ability to access funds. As independent, I speak drawing from my own experience. We have relied less on local funding and have had to work with, international finance organizations and houses. And we've also had to be robust in our thinking and defining how we access those capital. Because one of the challenges I feel that a lot of independents will face is to being able to scale the several hurdles that will be set before them. Again, drawing from our experience, we're currently quite in a number of countries in Africa, and we treat our business units each on their own merits, right? So your ability to raise finance can only be as good as what you present to the banks, and being able to do that means you have to organize yourselves accordingly. There's several hurdles you need to scale, especially with the energy transition conversations. Being able to balance that with the fact that we're in the drill, baby drill era, and ensuring that whatever activities that you undertake is done sustainably. So we work top down and sideways in ensuring that we carry everybody along. But I do foresee challenges with our ability to raise finance and organizing our fiscals, even though the PIA gives you some good incentives. If you take from our experience of yesteryears, we were not always here, and we moved from not being in the space to onshore, and then eventually we'll go deeper offshore. So whatever experiences that we leverage, we can use that going into the future, right? So I think, broadly speaking, there are challenges in that space. Unfortunately, our capital markets don't help as well. Not to throw anyone under the bus, but there's a lot of work to be done in that space to be able to internalize and raise the much needed financing to push the barrels. Thank you.
Absolutely. I saw Kingsley, agreeing with you, so I want to bring him in here on the financial challenges, that independents may face and how they've been able to overcome this. How has it been? What is your experience so far?
Okay, well, I think that, first of all, let us try and situate this journey. From 2010 to the present time, when the independents came strong on taking over from the IOCs, we've had an investment of nearly $10 billion from about 26 or so independents. And as I was discussing with a colleague just backstage, doling out all of that money is the first challenge. Now, having to have capital to roll out your programs and plan is the next level of challenge. So I think that it's helpful to be able to then structure the financing in such a way that it's supportive to the indigenous players. We know that indeed, because there is some history behind even qualifying to gain access to the IOC's, assets, then they have learned over time and also been able to build capacity to be able to. So where I'm going with this is that, yes, the lending partners, definitely will not support where there's no technical capacity to deliver. And so structuring of financing in such a way that the independents are able to roll out their programs and plan is what is needed and helpful to the indigenous players.
Absolutely. And Dr. Babajide, just to bring you in here, particularly with regards to collaboration within the industry and partnerships, how do these partnerships, be it with NMPC, service providers, other independents as well, how does that help independents to access or unlock financing?
Okay, thank you very much. If we want to situate the conversation that we're having vis-a-vis energy transition as well, so obviously financing is moving a little bit. The attention is not as much into oil production, especially outside of, say, Africa, and there's a lot of transition into clean and renewable energy. So from that standpoint, finances are stretched globally. But obviously, what has happened in the past and what has helped independent company is strong partnership with international partners who are interested in selling their own equipment. An example is, for instance, the Norwegian Export Credit Bank, who are based in Norway, So as long as you engage Norwegian content, meaning that you use Norwegian equipment, then they can finance your project and they provide equipment, and it's very minimal rates, And so we've done billions of dollars of projects in that way in Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea, and that helps mostly the independents. Obviously, the IOCs, the majors, they're able to navigate their way through a lot of the financing because of the reserve that they have. So, and then of course, there is also the industry partnership as well. For instance, let me use an example of the company where I'm on the board of director, Dorman Engineering Limited. We made a strategic decision to invest in technology. For instance, we have $20 million worth of inventory of OCTG pipe. This was the strategy of the company to say, how do we support independent operators as well? So we have this inventory, and we developed the strategic inventory program where instead of them waiting 6 months, 1 year to get this pipe, it's sitting in our facility in Port Harcourt, in Lagos. And so on a simple requisition, they can take this pipe, they pay us, So, but that's an investment that we made as Dorman, and in support of the independent players as well. So there are so many ways that things are happening now. I will be able to concede that sourcing financing locally from Nigerian bank is a little bit challenging because, it's by God's grace that some of these banks are not permanently ruined because of some of the support that they've rendered to some independent players in the past. But then, of course, there are still international funding organizations, like I said, that are focused, for instance, in supporting independent players as long as you buy their equipment. There's obviously some energy focused bank, Afrexim, and all the rest that are still significantly supporting the banks. But then there are also the challenges that the industry faces now. The no-paying Dangote situation, for instance, is not a good look for Nigeria. When you make all this investment from Afrexim, from all of the rest of them, and then you can see that the locals are trying to frustrate such an effort. So, those are various ways: internal strategic partnership, international funding, local cooperation and partnership, and then support from companies such as ours, are ways that independents have been able to navigate successfully.
I want to stay on the challenges, not to dwell on it, of course, just to discuss, because, this is your operation, this is your experience. I just want to sort of point or talk about, what challenges the independents face and other, players in the industry as well, and how, independents are navigating them or succeeding or, moving forward with these challenges. A few of them we've discussed financing now. There are a few others from infrastructure, supply chain, security. Kingsley, I want to start with you. What are the infrastructure bottlenecks that are, that most affect independents or players in the industry in terms of operating within the sector?
Okay, thanks for that. I think also linking to the earlier point I made with respect to having doled out a lot of cash to acquire, it also would have made sense to then share facilities, things like the pipeline, things like flow stations, gas processing. And these are some of the infrastructure and facilities that independents naturally could join and then share. However, there's still a challenge with the tariffing mechanism, which seem to edge out, if you like, a survival of the fittest, right? Because there's just a finite amount of infrastructure currently available for all the players. And we know that there's a challenge with enough infrastructure within the country to be able to export our crude, provide terminal servicing, gas processing, oil processing. And so I think there is also a need for the government to play a big role here with respect to how they can invest in some of this infrastructure. I mean, it's only government that has, if you like, the belly to hold on to investment and recover over 30 years. Independents naturally would want to invest and recover in 4 years, 5 years, and so they don't get into that heavy investment. It costs a lot to build a flow station. It costs a lot to build infrastructure like pipelines and so on and so forth. So there's a struggle there, but we're gradually getting there.
Doctor, what about the issue of vandalism?
Are you asking
Doctor, you're the only doctor on this panel.
the
Dr.
issue of
Babajide.
bandits?
Yeah, vandalism,
vandalism.
insecurity in those producing regions.
Okay, so you're saying how does that affect the independence?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, it's a problem Nigeria as a country has been dealing with for a long, long time, but I believe that the divestment from the major IOCs to independent is definitely helping the case.
Okay.
So, and the obvious reason is that these are not some strange British or Americans, and no disrespect to any British or American that is here, but I'm saying these are now part of you. These are Nigerians from wherever you are owning this company. So first of all, it helps the cause that it's a fellow Nigerian that are behind this thing and are the ultimate beneficiary, So I believe that in the long run, that will help, the issue of vandalism and banditry.
Okay.
Another thing which I noticed that the independents are doing surprisingly more than the IOCs is investing significantly in surveillance, and I was talking to an independent company and they were willing to make a significant investment in switching out the rigid pipeline to a different kind of pipeline, flexible flow line system, because of breaches to this pipeline system, and they're saying we want to significantly increase surveillance, so obviously they're willing to spend that money. They are engaging significantly more with the community and way better than what we have seen in the past, and I feel like even with the regulation, government involvement, streamlining some of the laws that affects operations in this local community, obviously continued and increased investment in the host community as well is what they're doing very well. So as long as they continue on this path, I feel
it's looking good.
Like it will reduce and probably, hopefully, disappear. Because, at the end of the day, we're all in it together now, as Nigeria. And my projection is, especially as oil is just transitioning, the span that we're looking at is between now and the next 25 years, in my estimate. So as things are transitioning, we are beginning to take ownership and then, invest in ourselves, ultimately to benefit from the resources that we have.
That's good. So we've moved from, independence, acquisition of financial issues or challenges, I would say, and then we've gone to infrastructure and now security. I want to move to now with the independents owning the assets and now the technical and operational realities as owners of the assets, because that's where all four of you are and where independents want to get to. And I'm going to bring in George here. Now that the independent is the owner of the assets, what are the major hurdles that they face in moving from exploration license perhaps or to, in producing?
All right, thank you for the question. For the independents, the hurdles are above ground and below. Like my panelists mentioned, from the acquisition, and I like to first of all, kind of divide the independents into two. The new entrants, that possibly are chasing less than 5,000 barrels of oil per day, and of course the other independents that are already established, and also their hurdles will be different, right? For the new entrant that just win the oil block, your first challenge is to, prove that your first oil, kind of give guarantee to your investors that you are able to generate revenue, because that will tie to you being able to recover the initial investment. So added to that, you need then to prove the volume, you need the data, process it, you need to get the necessary regulatory approvals. So the independents are nimble and they're agile and they can leverage on scalability, which is smaller than what the IOCs were doing. So if you leverage on that, then of course speed becomes eminent, and therefore you should do this thing faster. Then we move then into the, the regulators giving speedy approvals. Yeah. That will really help the independents, to kind of execute their project on time, drill their wells, tie them up, and then of course secure, right, the first oil and the revenue to either reinvest or, of course, recover their initial investment. There is also, of course, the issue of early engagement, with the community. In Heritage Energy, we have realized very early that no matter how novel or well-intended your project is, it can be completely derailed if you don't have the right partnership with the community. So this could be an hurdle. It could also be an advantage. For independents, because we are all embedded, around the community, you can quickly get them involved, create lasting partnership, right? Not as a reactive measure, but very preemptive and very intentional. And therefore, you buy yourself freedom to operate, and that removes the hurdle from you. Otherwise, that becomes a major hurdle. There is also the element, of financing projects. And of course, we also have talked about the tariffing, right? Even when you have your first oil, then of course you need to transport it before you sell it. And then of course there is the crude handling charge and everything that you need to, of course, bring to the table. And all that can be a serious issue to you. But beyond that, if you move then to the established independence, asset integrity and reliability becomes very critical to your operation. And of course, it kind of also show your investors that you have the capability to manage the asset, which is all the intent, of course, of the divestment in the first instance, that you demonstrate capability, right, to manage this asset, and sustainability, to show that what was handed over to you, you can sustain it, and then, of course, account for it to your investors.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned community. I think someone else mentioned it during this discussion, which brings me to, local content. Nigeria has local content law that we, of course, implement and monitor. I'm just saying, how are our independents acknowledging technology transfer in Nigeria and bringing in local content realities into their operations?
Thank you, Oneyka, for that question. Being architects of our own destiny, we have no choice, right? Again, it's always best to speak from experience, right? As a company, in our upstream space, top to bottom, completely run by Nigerians. And what we've also tried to do is to encourage our service providers by not necessarily prioritizing, Nigerian, service providers, but essentially, once you meet the barest minimum in terms of threshold, and you're Nigerian, definitely we're more than willing to work with you. But there are challenges, right? Especially in that space. You have multiple agencies essentially delivering the same service, and therefore enforcement becomes sort of weak, and you find a lot of the IOC still getting away with blue murder, as it were, and non-compliance is the order of the day. But as independents, I think because, for want of a better description, we have nowhere to go. We have to make it work. Therefore, it behoves us to ensure that, we're patronizing our own and ensuring that the capital required to move the industry forward is being retained in the country. Beyond that, there would be, in the years to come, if we're not intentional about how we approach the skill gap, we would find ourselves wanting, especially in the area of technological transfer. So as a company, what we've done is to go back to the basics and start to invest in institutions. And we take our graduate management programs very seriously so that we can ensure that we're transferring the knowledge and the technical know-how both internally and externally, right? So that for us is where we see, the future going forward. Thank you.
I want to also throw the same question to Kingsley, really, on the skill gaps and just how independents are ensuring that they comply with local content regulations and bring in, local participation as they progress in the industry.
Okay, at ND Western, which is the company I work for, in a joint venture relationship or partnership with NEPL, we have, of course, taken that necessary first step to ensure that all of the aspects of PAIA that link the community, such as the Host Community Development Trust, we have already begun to implement in earnest. And the other thing we have also done is ensure that in trying to also build capacity, we include the qualified host community companies as part of the exercise for tenders on literally all aspects, of work that we would like to do within the asset. So it's been encouraging because we have better collaboration and relationship. We've had that over the years anyway, but I think that what the PIA has done in strengthening the relationship in such a way that now the community actually believe that they are co-owners of the asset that we currently operate.
Good. We spoke about ESG, and I'm sort of wrapping up so I can take some questions from the audience if there are any questions. Tosin, I'm going to come back to Tosin because we're currently in an era where ESG, energy transition, are relevant or have been sort of put together with the oil and gas production and upstream discussions, right? So we spoke about the affecting financing. I think it was Dr. Babajide that mentioned it when he answered his question. I just wanted to ask you on how, what ESG commitments companies such as yours, making, and how are they balancing it with sustainability and increasing production, which is ultimately their goal?
The fact of the matter is, up until recently, everybody spoke about energy transition with such verve and vim until certain scenarios arose, and then all of a sudden we're restarting nuclear plants, right? So I'm not dismissing the need to, not take the conversation around energy transition seriously, but we have to also exploit the resources which we have, right? I then guess the conversation that we need to land is how you do that. It must be in a sustainable manner. And it must be, for instance, in one of our assets, we're taking all the gas that we're producing and using that to generate power for a host community. We have several initiatives that we've embarked upon. Again, it makes it easier because we've been in this space even long before having dealt with the need to finance our operations on the trading side. So it became an easier conversation for us to have in terms of meeting all of those goals, those responsibilities. We signed up, for instance, to UNEP edict. We're also part of the United Nations Global Compact. We had a seat at the table with the Millennium Development Goals. In areas of social interventions, they're too vast to mention, and we currently have over 100,000 people that we've supported in one way or the other, either through education, through healthcare interventions, through infrastructure upgrades, through refurbishment of schools and all of that. And I dare say we're not the only companies doing that. I can categorically tell you, there are quite a number of Nigerian independents that are also doing the same. Because, again, it is home to us, right? And, we don't want to underestimate the importance of, getting good cooperation and collaborative energy from the communities in which we undertake our activities. So, yes, we have to, in some manner or form, adhere to all of the ESG requirements, but we would ensure that all of those activities are still not in a way done to hamper our need to drill for more oil. We'll give, the importance to ensuring that we do our activities or undertake our activities in a sustainable manner. For instance, in our organization, we're going beyond dealing with those internally and even organizing training programs for procurement. We have a drive called a Sustainable Procurement Initiative that we're ensuring that all of our service providers also have frameworks in one way or the other that adhere to all of these ESG requirements. Yeah.
Dr. Kingsley, I want to bring you, I called him doctor, I want to bring you in here, Mr. Kingsley. Okay. Speaking on Nigerian independence as we're doing, can they carve out a competitive edge in areas such as gas monetization, emissions reduction, or renewable integration?
Okay, thanks for that. I think, first of all, ND Western JV, which is OML 34, they're quite heavy on gas. And of course, we all already know that gas is one of those transition, fuels or mechanism. We get to zero carbon emission eventually. Now, I think what the government has done with one of the programs being rolled out, I think since 2021, which is the Decade of Gas, that is actually a 10-year program which should lapse by 2030. There are so many aspects of that program that is ensuring that the emissions targets are gradually met. And the first of them is in the utilization of gas, like I mentioned earlier on, replacing the liquid fuels with gas. There's gas to power, there's the LPG for cooking gas. From that program, the government had a target of about 13 to 15 million homes with cooking gas, and it's 2025. Don't ask me if we've met that target, but I know that they're on that journey. I will also speak about the emissions control. I mean, there are regulations in place that are actually checking that. The flares out is one of them. And deliberately, the regulator will not even approve any project on oil and gas development if you don't have that solution in place. So that's one of them. Secondly, if you take a look at the renewables integration, like you spoke about, the development of oil and gas fields at the present time are looking for ways to ensure that there is a hybrid of energy being deployed in oil field operations. One of them is trying to put up solar to replace a lot of the expensive diesel that have been used to run generators. Another one is also the mini grids, which are, grids that are set up just to manage oil field operations and also, by extension, the local communities around. So some of these initiatives on the renewables, emission reduction are part of the play in all of our field development plans. And I think we're making some progress at that. And so, by extension, the indigenous are also doing likewise.
Thank you, George. We're wrapping up now, but I wanted to ask one final question. Might be the penultimate one, actually. In the course of perhaps preparing for this conference, I did some research and just learned that Nigeria actually has the highest number of independents in the world. It's the single country with the most independents in the world. Now, I know that's still growing. We're probably going to get more as we go. And I was just thinking, how are Nigerian independents approaching intra-African participation? Under the back of the AFCTA or any other mechanism, how are we looking at open markets, frontier markets, be it sister neighbor countries, West Africa, or even new markets like Namibia? Sahara, I'll start with you because obviously the company is in other parts of Africa as well. So I'll start with you on how what is the approach for independence?
I think that question should actually be for the president of the African Union and whoever the.
If they're here, I would throw it to them.
No, but seriously, I think one of the major challenges that we have as a continent is our inability to realize the strength that we have, and that strength comes in the unity that we should otherwise, be pushing, right? The amount of cost savings that organizations would enjoy if there was freedom of movement of people and of trade, right? Africa needs to go to a point where, we're borderless, single currency at some point, and then the ease of transacting. Because if you look at where we're in Nigeria, we have investments in Ghana, in Ivory Coast, all across West Africa and East Africa as well. And within and around where we operate, we have expended sums, that would ordinarily have been deployed elsewhere if those barriers were lifted. I think beyond being able to establish presence in other countries, I think governments need to start sitting down and having conversations around how they can optimize and make sure that businesses thrive beyond, their places where they originate from, right? So the future, that conversation must be brought to bear. I think until we get there, the rate at which organizations like ours can grow will be hampered, right? And like you said, Nigeria accounts for quite a number of independents, right? And if we go into other countries, you can work with other local players to build capacity.
Yeah.
And who benefits? The people benefit and the organizations and the government, right? So I think we must start to have that speak as quickly as we can. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else on the panel has any comments on the future of independence as an intra-African play.
Well, I'll just kind of take it from the service provider's standpoint. Obviously, they play a significant role in supplying the technology that ties all the independents together. So, in a way, in order for the independents to leverage on best practices, sometimes they scale into various markets, and then, of course, like I said, I'll use example of Dorman engineering again. We have solutions where if in the Western they have operations across Africa, for instance, then we're able to partner successfully in a way that it benefits them by working not just in Nigeria, for instance, but across Ghana, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, and those various locations. So, but it's surprising to hear that Nigeria has the highest number of independents, and considering that it's a very recent transition. But, so I'll take that as my point.
Okay. Before I go to Q&A, I know we don't even have time. Any closing remarks from Kingsley and George on the future of independence in Nigeria?
Okay. Thank you. So the energy landscape is changing globally and locally and in Nigeria. And like you rightly said, I think it was in 2023 that it was recognized that the split between the IOCs and the independent in terms of daily production was 50-50. With the recent divestment of the IOCs, we can only believe when the numbers are crunched that the balance has tilted towards the independents. But to be able to position for the future, a lot more is required. We need to prove our capability, right? We need to ensure integrity by establishing strong corporate governance. That is the only way we can engender trust for investors and even for the lender, right? Also, we need to establish trust with the host community. The future can only be bright, but it goes beyond taking over oil wells and facilities and managing them. It goes to the point in Heritage Energy, we are building a culture that was sustained in terms of governance structures that have been established. And just to put it in context, Heritage Energy operates the biggest land assets in Nigeria. And of course, we are in the Western Corridor, we also manage the trunk line that all injectors inject into and take the crude oil to the terminal. It is important that we establish credibility as an independent for everybody to find us reliable. And of course, our asset integrity must be top-notch. And I think that is applicable to all the other independents. Thank you.
30 seconds.
So I think one of the very key things I would like to put out there in closing is that we have the PIA, right? And we also know this is a guide for the industry. But we also do know that in implementing it, there are times you come with fees, levies, and even new tax regulations that work against, the benefits of PIA. We should, if you like, be consistent with the rules of engagement in the oil and gas space to support the indigenous such that they can survive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, guys, I don't have time for any questions. Thank you for staying with us. I hope that you enjoyed the discussion that we had today. I would just say a round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you. And have a good evening, everyone.